Okay, I think we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back, David. It's so good to have you back on.
Yeah, it's been a while. Thanks very much for having me.
It is certainly my pleasure. I'm so honored that you would agree to come on and chat about this. I know we were mentioning just before we went live how many indie authors that I've seen who've been talking about, hey, now that I'm indie publishing, I'm not making royalties like I thought I would. So maybe I can ghostwrite for people, and that would be a way to supplement my income and still get paid for writing. And I'm not a ghostwriter myself, but you have an extensive amount of experience with the field.
Mhm.
So for those who don't know who you are and your background, because you do self-publish your own books, you have an amazing series of books, as well as some experience with the ghostwriting. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And
So I'm David Green. I write fantasy. So I have kind of two series. One is complete, which is like epic fantasy, and one is like an urban fantasy kind of noir kind of thing. Hi everyone, and I have a cozy fantasy that's currently on submission through my agent because we're trying to look at if we can go like with a trad kind of way with that one for the start. But yeah, so I live in Ireland in Galway, and since I've been kind of writing, my kind of like my full time thing is looking after my son. Like I stay at home looking after him. So it was just one of those things where it was like with the ghostwriting, I kind of got offered it at first. It was I knew someone who was doing ghostwriting and had too many offers. So this was probably like the height of the pandemic, um, and they were getting kind of a bit swamped with it. So they asked if I would help out. So they kind of did like a kind of middle person between me and the client, and we all kind of agreed to do it. And so I started doing that then, just for a couple of reasons. Like one, for a little bit of extra income, and secondly for just practice with writing, because it was one of those things where it's like I'd written quite a lot of shorts in like quite a lot of short stories outside of fantasy, so like horror and sci-fi and other things like that. But like primarily, I was kind of writing fantasy, but in terms of ghostwriting, I was like a little bit kind of more open with stuff because it was like I'd like to try some different things and just practice like the kind of craft and that kind of thing. So it was good for that, because they say you should always write 1,000,000 words before you kind of one of those old sayings, write 1,000,000 words before you publish your own book. But we don't do that this way. But I thought I could write 1,000,000 words in ghostwriting instead. And see how that would go. And it's been going quite well. Like I've been doing it steadily now for 3 years, I guess now, coming up to whilst I've been kind of working on my own stuff.
yeah, so you really had known someone and they helped you get into the ghostwriting. When you were making that decision, was there ever a point where you were worried that, oh, I'm not going to get recognized for what I'm writing? Was that a
Um,
deterrent, something you had to overcome, or was that never really an issue because it's like, oh, this is safe, like you said, I can practice,
yeah,
and then it's on somebody else's name?
yeah. No, yeah, I didn't really kind of think of it that way as sort of my own, because I mean, there's a lot of stuff in it. I mean, now like after that kind of that first one, it was done through Fiverr, so I had to set up a Fiverr profile. So I do all the stuff through that. Now there is some issues with that now, which we'll probably come to a bit later on, where it's because at one point it was very, very vibrant on there, but obviously some things have changed in the landscape of writing over the last specifically 6 months. But it was one of those things where it was a lot of kind of ideas that you were getting were kind of stuff that I wouldn't necessarily write myself with under my own kind of name. It wasn't stuff that really interested me as sort of like, I'd love to work on this as my own thing. Which is kind of weird because it's like you're still having to put the same amount of, probably not the same amount of time into it, but still a decent amount of time. But the way I kind of looked at it was like, well, this is just a job, and I've worked lots of jobs in my life that I didn't like doing, that I had to do, whereas I like writing. And it might not be something that's like completely something that I would write myself and release myself and put my name on it. But even still, it's still more enjoyable than most of the other jobs that I've ever done in my life before. And it was part of that thing where, you kind of do it, and it might be a slightly different subgenre of fantasy, or it might be even a sci-fi or a horror or something like that. And you kind of look at it and go, well, there's something here that I've kind of learned that I can bring into my own work, or there's a different kind of viewpoint from the person that that I'm doing the work for, the client, that is kind of like, looking at something that's important to them in terms of what's important in the story, and you kind of look at that and go, okay, well, maybe that's important to more people, and you can kind of incorporate some of that stuff into your own work. And so, yeah, it's been really, really beneficial. So I never really kind of looked at it in that kind of way as like, oh, if this is a huge seller or something, then no one will know it's me. It's I don't really mind for that. If it was, then great. But yeah.
Yeah. And I think the reason I bring that up is because a lot of times when I do see indies post about thinking about ghostwriting, 2024 seems to be the year where we are ultra tuned into what is writing or who is writing, like AI versus ghostwriters, content, what level of rights these people have over works and things like that. And I think there's a lot of confusion about, does the ghostwriter have rights over the work because they're the ones actually writing it, or are they actually writing it? Are they like co-writers that just plug in, or do they write the whole thing from scratch? Are you coming up with ideas, or are you getting ideas? And so the confusion makes it maybe seem like more of an ethical question for some writers. So that's
Yeah.
what I was really looking forward to hearing from you, is like, how does that process in your experience typically work?
So generally, yeah, generally the ghostwriter has no rights to any of the stuff. You kind of you're working a job for someone, and this kind of goes on from from self-published level up to the very kind of highest level of traditional publishing. The when you get autobiographies are very, very rarely written by the person that's on the front of the book and whose name is on them. Sometimes they are, but more often they're not. And the person that's written them, unless there's some kind of agreement where it's like kind of a really big name that's doing it, usually they're not mentioned at all. And you even have some stuff like James Patterson, which is basically just a brand these days, and it's various different people writing them. And James Patterson has little to no involvement in most of the books with his name on it these days. And there's obviously rumours about other high profile older writers who probably don't have time to write 420,000 word books a year as they're coming out. But so it's like,
Sanderson.
yeah, I'm not going to name any names, but there's a few. But yeah, so it kind of and in terms of like the actual work that goes into it, so I've done, I don't know, about maybe 30 different books now for ghostwriting, I think, from various lengths, from 50,000 words to 120,000, I think is the longest one I've done, and for someone else, and they range from people that I've come across with a chapter by chapter synopsis that is basically like, you just flesh out the story from these chapters and they want exactly how as it is in there, and you just turn in these like 150 word outlines in each chapter to whatever, to people that are like, I would just like you to tell a story, just write a book. It's like, okay, what kind of story would you like? And it's like, well, I kind of like it a little bit like this. And anywhere in between that. So so it's basically stuff where it's like, you just pluck an idea out of thin air to you're just fleshing out a larger idea. In the last year, I have had a couple of people approach me and I've turned them down, where the book was clearly written by an AI program and they were asking me to expand the book and rewrite it. That's happened a few times in the last the first couple of years that I was doing it, I didn't get any like that. But then in the last say 7 months, I probably had 4 or 5 of those that I've turned down because I just don't really want to work on it, and it's just it's actually more work to kind of unpick the madness of what the AI has tried to do. I have had a couple of people kind of say, "Would you like to be co-credited on this as well?" And I've said no because it's a ghostwriting thing, and I'm not kind of doing that for credit. Like in a lot of ways, it's a different reason for me, but it's definitely something that's changing now, and like particularly through Fiverr. In the last few years, you usually get a deluge of offers in January and February of people like, the New Year's resolution is to have a book out with their name on it, and they kind of approach it. But this year has been very, very quiet and very slow because I think a lot of these people are actually just they're just paying for a subscription for an AI program now, and they're getting it written instead that way. But with that in mind, offers have started picking up again with people like, I have this 40,000 page book that I'd like to expand into 80,000 words, please, and it's AI written. So it's kind of changing a little bit, and it's interesting kind of way to kind of see how that has kind of changed and the ethics of it. But generally for me, it's kind of like, I don't want any credit for it, and I don't want my name on them not because I'm not like proud of the work or anything, but it's just not. Some of the stuff is, I've written like grimdark fantasy, which would be a lot darker than what I would usually write for mine, like a couple of shades darker than what I would write for mine, or there's more like paranormal romantic stuff, which wouldn't be kind of what I would write in my urban fantasy either. It'd be a little bit different. So it's not really that I want my name on them for that reason, because it's not the stuff that I would write for myself and for people that read my work.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I think what you said about James Patterson puts that all together. Is at some point as an author, your name becomes part of your brand.
Right.
It's not like, this is my debut. Maybe I can change directions, which is sort of what I did. I started in one genre. I was like, I don't really like romance all that much. I'm going to shift to stuff that isn't romance anymore.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, and establishing that there's a whole broad range of customers that come to you with sort of written needing help, if someone was considering ghostwriting as brand new going into 2024, would you say that if being identified as part of the owner of the piece is important to them, that maybe they're not quite where they need to be to do that as a job?
Yeah. It's I've so it depends it depends how you're kind of going about it as well. Like if you're doing it for, generally I think all of the ones I've done have been through Fiverr, because they kind of have access to the kind of the messages that you're doing and the offers and jobs. So if there is any kind of like problems, they're there as a mediator, which hasn't really happened, thankfully. But they're there for that, to kind of give not only the buyer protection, but the seller as well. And I did have one person that was kind of like trying to get me to sign an NDA for something that I'd done, and I was kind of like, and I wasn't really comfortable with the terminology inside the term NDA they were sending. So I was kind of like, look, like Fiverr protects all of this anyway, and also I have no interest in claiming this work, and this is here in writing. You can see that it's here in writing if there's any kind of problems with it. So if you're going kind of like, just directly with someone, then yeah, there would be that kind of thing where you would kind of look into that in terms of like protection for yourself and protection for the buyer and seller. And there probably would be more like NDAs involved and other things like that. That's the thing now as well with it as well. But one of the reasons why I kind of tend to, there's a few reasons why I don't want to work on the ones that are kind of written by AI and then kind of expanded. But one of the main reasons is for the plagiarism aspect of it, because the AI can't create something from scratch; it's skimming it from somewhere, and I'm quite well read or widely read, but I'm not that widely read. So there might be something that's like well, this seems good already. I'll leave it as it is, and it might be complete passages from something else that's just been tweaked or mixed. So I wouldn't want to be involved in that in any kind of way. So yeah, if someone is wanting to get into it this year, something like a Fiverr or Upworks or something like that would be that has that kind of like robust kind of thing that's built in where there's no like kind of face to face with someone, and there's that kind of mediator in case you need it. It would be quite beneficial, I think.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that when you ghostwrite, like for example on Fiverr, my Fiverr name is not my author name. Do you recommend starting out with a different, like a pseudonym for your ghostwriting, so that people can't be like, go and look up your books?
Right.
Oh my god.
Yeah. It's a strange one because it's because so with Fiverr and stuff like that, a lot of it is driven by reviews. So you get reviewed when you finish it, and like, you know, you build a reputation on there. So if you're starting off from scratch and you're just a username and you've got no reviews and you've got nothing else, it can be quite tricky to start getting work. So you can put like a series of different levels on there. So a lot of people kind of will have like, you know, they'll advertise doing short stories because they're a lot quicker, and it kind of builds a little bit of confidence with people and all that. They can get reviews for those as well and everything. I have seen people that just use their own name, their author name, and they kind of have like a link to their work that people can go and check out, their reviews for their work and everything like that. I kind of went in that direction at first, but then I changed after a while because I got the reviews on Fiverr and I had that kind of like reputation was fine. So I was like, I don't think I need to kind of trade on my own kind of reputation as a writer to kind of do that. So I kind of like backed away from that. So I changed track on that. And I think it's probably, again, like the whole point of the kind of ghostwriter thing is there is that thing about being anonymous. So I think it's like it works well both ways, I think. But, you know, it just really depends what it is you're trying to get out of it. Like, you know, there's various different ways of getting into ghostwriting. It's not just through Fiverr. There's other things, you know, and you can build like you can build a full career doing it that way. Like, you know, but with that, you'd probably need to use your own kind of credentials and your own name and everything. So yeah, it depends. It just depends what you're comfortable with, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, like, I'm an editor for a living. And when I get a new customer, a lot of times we give sample edits, you know, just a few pages to make sure that the styles match and everything. Is that something a ghostwriter should be prepared to do? And if so, is there like a limit to, if someone says, hey, I want you to write a sample for me of this, would you take that? How much would you give them?
So it is a question that comes up quite a bit, and usually it's someone will ask for a sample of your work. Now, what I used to do was I used to say, well, all of my work is available on Kindle Unlimited, so you can, if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can go and check it out. So I used to do that for a little while. And then when I was kind of wanting to kind of like keep my own kind of like identity a little bit kind of more secret, I would have something that's like, you know, maybe an unpublished short story or like maybe like a draft of something that's not been published. So just ready just to kind of show them as like a little, and it would only be like, you know, a few pages or something like that. It wouldn't be like work for free. So it wouldn't be like, you know, they'd ask me to write something. That's the important thing when you're doing this is not to do anything for free, because there is sometimes some people that will try and wrangle the prices and try and really kind of devalue what it is that you're working on. So it's knowing your own kind of worth on that as well. But yeah, I'd have something there to sample. Now with the fact that, like, you know, I have like quite, you know, I have a substantial amount of 5-star reviews on it and stuff like that, I don't really get asked that as much as I used to. But especially at the start, that yeah, there would be, and it would be something just to kind of think about. And the thing is as well, you don't want to have a sample of something that's been published just in case. because especially if you're exclusive on Amazon, you don't want to be like handing out stuff that's published on Amazon to people for free, just in case Amazon
So you have
find
like
out.
a throwaway project that, hey, this is just for people who ask for samples. Here you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's a good thing to have. Just that a short story that's just not found a home, or something that you were practicing on, or like a discarded chapter of some kind. Yeah, it's handy to have there because it is a question that comes up quite a lot.
Yeah. And so one of the questions that I know I've seen a lot that sort of sparked this video is, can you actually make money to make the writing and the work worth the time as a ghostwriter more than like writing and self-publishing your own books?
Yeah, I mean it's decent money. So there is that thing, like especially through Fiverr. So you'll advertise like the gigs that you're doing, which is like gigs is like your things that you'll do, your jobs, and you'll have like a price range. So for my novels, I have like a price range depending on word count. And there will always be people that try and negotiate it and try and whittle it down a little bit. But it's kind of knowing your own worth and kind of looking at it and saying, okay, well, what is if you look at, it through editing, like, editing how much you're going to cost per word. And it's kind of looking at that and kind of thinking, well, how much time and effort am I going to spend in writing 100,000 words, for example, for someone? And then, you can build in onto your offers, like kind of how many, if you'll do revisions and if you'll do this and this and how much time. And you can actually like add on as well. Like my standard thing is like 90 days for any project, apart from short stories. So like, and I don't really do the short stories anymore. So for novels, no matter what the length is, I usually go with 90 days. But if someone wants to, there is an option. If someone wants it in 60 days, they can pay more and I'll, work faster. I guess, and everything. So you can kind of do that. And the way I always do it, I mean, at some points I've worked on 4 books at once, include like one of my own books and 3 ghostwriting projects at the same time. So it depends on your kind of your capacity really, and what you can do. But yeah, writing. I mean, when I first started it, I put my prices quite low, just to kind of get work through it, and then I kind of increased them over time just to kind of and they're still a little bit lower than what the average is, but that's obviously probably going to stay that way because of the AI thing. But there most people that I know that do it that also self-publish make more money through ghostwriting than they do through self-publishing, which is, it's kind of sad really. Like, well, that's just the state of things. But what's good about it is it's a good supplement to I mean, it's a good supplement to get in that extra money, but if you were just putting it straight back into your own writing, it's writing 50,000-60,000 word novella will pay for a really, really high quality cover, or it'll pay for an editor, or it'll pay for a substantial advertising campaign. So it can really help with that, putting it back in. If you're in that position where you can just put it back into your own kind of, to supplement your own kind of work and everything, it's really helpful.
Yeah. I think there's something that we didn't talk about, because I'm on Fiverr and I know you're on Fiverr. And if you're watching and you're checking out Fiverr for the first time, you might be worried, oh, am I going to get paid? Because if you're going one-to-one, there's that risk. Like if you're trying to manage this on your own, you're going to deliver a book, you're not going to get paid your money, or they're going to be unhappy. And Fiverr adds that layer of protection in there, because they collect the funds when the person buys, but you don't get the funds till the work is done. So they're protecting you by having the money for you. They're protecting the buyer by not paying you till you've delivered the work and they've accepted the work. So, yeah. What level of responsibility is on your shoulders as the ghostwriter when it comes down to editing? Like, at what point do you turn it over to them and they're responsible for coordinating everything else?
Yeah, I think, nowhere in my profile does it say that I'm going to edit the stuff for them. And um, and when I kind of like talk to them when they come to like kind of make an offer and stuff like that, I always say that, you know, you should always get an editor afterwards. Because like just with anything, like, you know, you have to get an editor. It's a different process. It's a different, you're using a different part of your brain. Like even yourself, you're an editor, but I'm sure you get someone else to edit your own work because, like, you know, it's a different, you need that different set of eyes. So what I do is it's kind of, it might, I won't do as many drafts as I would do on my own work, because like I have that thing where it's like, because obviously I work with an indie press and I have my agent as well. So I kind of want to have that thing where it's like, I want to have that kind of level what they expect from me, where it's like quite a well polished kind of thing. And I don't really want to kind of, when I'm getting to the editing process, I want to kind of spend more time on the development edits instead of like, you know, all the other stuff like proofreading and all that kind of stuff, and like basic things that I should have gotten as a writer. I'm really keen on just kind of like making the thing the best version of it that it can be, and I want it to be the best version of it that I have made it at that point before it goes there, right? So with the ghostwriting stuff, I'm not quite at that level with it because you know, most of the time the stuff isn't my idea, and a lot of the time it's like the people that are kind of raising these jobs have like dossiers of backstories and characters, and you know, sometimes it's like things that, like, you know, they've been playing D&D and it's like the characters from D&D and they want a story about them, or it's things that they've done through, like, you know, various different kind of like ways. And a lot of times a lot of these people don't speak English as their first language, and sometimes these are being translated into other languages, I understand, like from what some people have said to me, like, you know, so it's for me it's like I kind of get to that point where I'm happy with it as if it was like a second draft for me, which is basically what I usually do when I'm writing, is that I write a chapter and then I read through that chapter and kind of do another draft of it immediately, like, you know, before I move on. And then that's kind of, so by the end of, I've kind of finished the story, wrote the end, I've done 2 drafts of it already. That's generally where I stop with the ghostwriting stuff and send that on. And for me, like, you know, it's up to them what they do, but I've said, you know, we should get an editor, always get an editor regardless. I don't know what they do with it, but I've had lots of repeat customs, so like they must be happy. So I don't know, but yeah, it's not on, unless you're offering that as part of your package as being an editor as well. Then no, it's, you're just there to kind of write it. It's a different thing, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you're going to do that, and obviously make sure your price reflects that you're writing and editing the thing as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've seen so many different people go, well, you should, you know, hire an editor, but that comes down to that confidentiality. You know, that I'm not going to hire somebody else to look at a book somebody else gave me. You know, if I'm
No.
editing, I'm not going to hire somebody else to do, you know, copy edit. Like,
No,
I would
definitely
leave that on them.
No, definitely not. No, definitely not. I mean, you're being hired to do a job, and your job is to write the thing. Your job isn't to edit the thing or proofread the thing. It's a completely different skill set. And yeah, you'd always want someone else to do it. Like, you know, I don't know many writers that, well, no, that's not actually true. I do know a few writers that edit their own stuff, and they could always do with another editor. So.
Yeah, no, I have editors. I self-edit to an extent, but it always goes off to at least 2 or 3 people.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know we're at time. I had one other question, and that really came down to the ability to write on demand. Now, you mentioned that you give these people on Fiverr a 90-day turnaround. I know a lot of writers with our own books, we feel like, man, it takes me forever to write a book of my own. Is it a different mental place when it's a job that makes it easier to write it faster? Or if someone struggles with a book of their own, should they also assume that it will be a struggle to write for other people?
Yeah, I think it's slightly different. I think, well, I'll say this on the caveat that I give myself 90 days to write a book as well. It's one of the few things that I kind of like agreed with Stephen King on in his book on writing, where it's like you should only work on 90 days for a book. I think he says like 3 months, I think, isn't it? Because like your mindset is shifts afterwards. And I kind of agree with that in an extent. If you can do it, I know everyone's different. Everyone's writing process is different. So what works for me doesn't work for everyone else. And that's people, if they're listening, shouldn't be like, oh yeah, okay, I definitely should do this in 3 months, because it might not work for you. But for me, it works. And I set myself 90 days for every project, no matter what it is. So if it's like if I'm working on one of my urban fantasy books, which is 80,000 words, it's 90 days. If it was my last epic fantasy one that I wrote, which was 260,000 words, it was 90 days, right? That's just the way that I do it. But there is that thing with the ghostwriting stuff where it is just a lot easier because, like, it is that thing where it is, well, this is just a job. It's not going to have my name on it. You don't have that kind of same internal pressure where it's like, you've got, is this thing with my name on it that I'm writing, that my characters that I've created, my world that I've created, for my readers, is it going to match up to the other stuff that they've read so far? Are they going to like it? Is it good enough for my own standards? So for a lot of the things that you're doing for ghostwriters, you've got like they do send stuff over that's got it all sketched out. So like part of the work is done. You know where the story's going. If you are someone who kind of who's a pantser, it's helpful because it's already there, and you don't have to be thinking like for hours like, how am I going to do this? It's there, and a lot of people send over like stuff about the characters and stuff about this, and a lot of them do like quite artwork as well, and they might send over like drawings and stuff and what have you, which is all helpful. It makes it just the process a bit faster, and there is that kind of thing as well. Like for me, like you can always extend the deadline on Fiverr if you need to, and I've had to do it once because I was really, really sick. I had to extend the deadline, and I felt terrible for doing it. But generally, like I don't want to be late for anything in my life. So for doing something that someone's waiting on, because they might have an editor lined up, they might have a formatter lined up or whatever. I don't want to be late for it. So there is that thing where it's like, well, I have 90 days. I've said 90 days, so I need to have it done in 90 days. And more often than not, I'm usually before the 90 days. I'm usually done with it. So yeah, it's for those people that kind of have that where it's like their own stuff takes a little bit longer. It is a different process. It might be different, but it also might not be different, and that is something that you can kind of talk to the client about. And generally, they're quite understanding, so long as you. A lot of them understand that it doesn't take just like a couple of days to write a book.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, for being so open and transparent about your journey and your advice to everybody who's considering it.
Yeah, not a problem at all. Hopefully people found it helpful.
Yes, this was great. And if you're watching and you would like to check out David's books, the ones with David's name on them, the link is in the description box where you can go read some of David's work. I don't have your Fiverr on here, but if you'd like me to add your Fiverr for ghostwriting, I can add it. David's like,
it's fine.
But this has been so helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Bye, everybody.